Well, you just picked the wrong guy for what you want.
Did I?
Yeah, I'm not in the market.
Hollywood spent decades selling these men as heroes, noble cowboys, charming leading men, America's favorite grandfathers. But behind the cameras, some were accused of blacklisting civil rights supporters, defending segregation, promoting white supremacist beliefs, and even celebrating one of the darkest days in American history.
Instead of blaming politics for what's going on, the good and the bad politicians don't want to get mixed up in that.
In this countdown, you'll discover why John Wayne's own words still spark outrage today.
Martin Luther King Jr., despite opposition from the slain Nobel laureate's family and the civil rights group that he led until his 1968 assassination.
How Walter Brennan allegedly reacted to the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Why Paul Newman landed on President Richard Nixon's enemies list after standing up for civil rights. And the shocking actions of Hollywood legends whose private beliefs were kept hidden from audiences for decades. Every story in this video comes from documented sources, including FBI records, congressional testimony, published biographies, archived interviews, and historical newspapers. No internet myths, no tabloid gossip, just the documented record.
Very good shot. I got a hunch, fat man. I got a hunch it's me from here on in.
And wait until you reach number 1, because the final story is so disturbing that it completely changes the image of one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The civil rights hero Hollywood forgot.
You don't trust the Russians, you don't do this. That has been so built up in our...
Before we expose the 9 men who became enemies of equality, you need to understand who Paul Newman actually was. Because his commitment to civil rights wasn't some PR move. It wasn't calculated. It cost him. In August of 1963, Paul Newman boarded a plane to Washington, D.C., alongside some of the most powerful names in entertainment: Marlon Brando, Sidney Poitier, and Harry Belafonte. He stood in a crowd of 200,000 people and listened to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. deliver the speech that would define a generation. The March on Washington wasn't a safe choice for anyone in Hollywood. But Newman didn't stop there. He traveled to Gadsden, Alabama, one of the most dangerous cities in America during the desegregation movement. He narrated civil rights documentaries. When doing so made him a target in an industry that valued silence above principle. He donated to organizations working to dismantle segregation. He supported candidates who fought for voting rights and equal treatment under law. He put his name, his face, and his career on the line, at a time when doing so could mean exile from the industry that made him a star. Richard Nixon noticed. The most powerful man in America placed Paul Newman on his official enemies list. Most actors would have seen that as a scarlet letter, a career death sentence. Newman called it the greatest honor of his life. For over 50 years, Paul Newman wasn't just one of Hollywood's biggest stars, he was one of its bravest voices.
Well, you just picked the wrong guy for what you want.
Did I?
Yeah, I'm not in the market.
While most actors stayed silent, kept their heads down, protected their bank accounts, maintained their industry connections, Newman marched. He spoke. He acted. He became the moral conscience of an industry that desperately needed one. But fighting for civil rights meant Newman saw something most Americans never witnessed. He worked alongside legends, Oscar winners, box office titans, men and women who audiences loved, and he saw their private faces, the racism that hid behind studio publicity, the segregationist views they whispered behind closed doors.
Very good shot. I got a hunch, fat man. I got a hunch it's me from here on in.
The deliberate campaigns they waged to keep Hollywood white, and their vision of America unchallenged. Newman understood something crucial. These weren't just men with outdated language or uncomfortable jokes from a different era. These were powerful figures whose prejudices had real, measurable consequences. They blocked opportunities. They destroyed careers. They built an industry architecture designed from the ground up to exclude anyone who didn't fit their racial hierarchy. They weaponized their influence. They made deliberate choices to harm. This is their story. Number 9. Robert Taylor, Patriotism as a Weapon. His name was Robert Taylor. Audiences knew him as the handsome face on the silver screen, the romantic leading man, the movie star in every sense of the word. MGM's marketing department had built him into a brand. Dark hair, chiseled features, effortless screen presence. In the 1940s and 1950s, Robert Taylor was one of MGM's most bankable stars. Audiences saw exactly what the studio wanted them to see. What those audiences never saw was a man using his influence to wage a methodical war against anyone in Hollywood who believed in racial equality. When the House Un-American Activities Committee began its hunt for supposed communists in Hollywood in the 1950s, most actors dreaded the prospect of being called to testify. The blacklist was devastating careers. Reputations were being destroyed. Families were being torn apart. The entire industry lived in fear. Robert Taylor didn't wait to be called. He volunteered. He walked into those hearings eagerly, with the confidence of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. He named colleagues, people he had worked with, people he called friends, people he suspected of being sympathetic to progressive causes and civil rights activism. He destroyed careers without hesitation, without remorse. The strategy was brilliant in its cruelty. Weaponize patriotism. Frame the fight for civil rights as un-American. Transform the desire for equality into communist conspiracy. Anyone who believed that African American people deserved equal opportunities in Hollywood, equal treatment under law, equal dignity as human beings, they became suspects. They became threats. They became targets. Robert Taylor became a founding member of the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Values. This wasn't a casual membership. This wasn't his name on a letterhead while he went about his business. The Motion Picture Alliance actively worked to suppress progressive voices in Hollywood. They opposed integration efforts. They used their considerable influence to blacklist anyone who challenged the racial power structure that kept the industry overwhelmingly white. Taylor didn't stop there. He actively lobbied his own studio to fire writers he considered too sympathetic to civil rights causes. He weaponized his position. He used his status as one of Hollywood's biggest stars not to elevate other voices, but to silence them. In Taylor's world, supporting equality for Black Americans wasn't progressive politics. It was suspicious. It was un-American. It was communist infiltration. Paul Newman represented everything Robert Taylor despised. A progressive actor, willing to risk his career, his reputation, his safety for the principle of equality. Newman marched. Taylor destroyed careers from the safety of a congressional hearing room and a powerful studio lot. But Taylor wasn't the only Golden Age star who discovered that anti-communist rhetoric provided the perfect cover for racist crusades. Number 8. Adolphe Menjou, Communism as a Disguise. In 1947, an actor named Adolphe Menjou stood before the House Un-American Activities Committee and made a public declaration that revealed his entire character. He claimed to be the most informed person in America on the subject of communism. The statement says, everything you need to know about who this man actually was. Adolphe Menjou had built a respectable career as a sophisticated character actor throughout Hollywood's golden age. His polished appearance and continental charm made him a favorite for roles requiring elegance and authority. Audiences saw a man of culture, a gentleman, a refined performer. Off-screen, Menjou channeled that same charm into becoming one of Hollywood's most aggressive crusaders against civil rights. His weapon? The convenient disguise of fighting communism. Here's how it worked. Menjou's definition of communist activity was infinitely expandable. It included anyone who supported racial integration, anyone who advocated for equal treatment of minorities in Hollywood, anyone who believed in basic civil rights for Black Americans. According to Menjou's twisted logic, believing that Black actors deserved equal opportunities was proof of communist sympathies. It was evidence of un-American thinking. It was a threat to the nation itself. He was instrumental in blacklisting artists whose only real crime was believing in racial equality. Writers saw their careers destroyed. Directors found themselves unemployable. Actors disappeared from the industry. All because Menjou and men like him decided that supporting civil rights was synonymous with betraying America. Paul Newman saw through it immediately. He understood that actors like Menjou wrapped their racism in the American flag and called it patriotism. They didn't actually hate communism. They hated change. They hated the idea that the industry they controlled, the system they had built, might one day be forced to treat everyone equally. Menjou and Taylor used politics as their weapon. They hid their racism behind ideology. But the next name on this list didn't need political cover. He carried darker allegiances that connected him to something far more sinister than American anti-communism. Number 7. Errol Flynn. Nazi sympathies and hidden darkness. On screen, Errol Flynn was everything. He was Robin Hood, stealing from the rich. He was Captain Blood, commanding a pirate ship. He was the most dashing adventure star Hollywood had ever produced. His smile lit up theaters. His sword fights thrilled millions. Women wanted him. Men wanted to be him. His charm was legendary. His talent was undeniable. Behind that legendary charm hid allegiances that would have destroyed any career if the public had known the full truth. Throughout his life, Errol Flynn was dogged by credible accusations of Nazi sympathies, not casual political disagreements, but disturbing connections to fascism and white supremacy. Reports placed him in Nazi Germany and fascist Spain during the Spanish Civil War. Not as a journalist observing from a distance, not as a concerned outsider, as someone who sympathized with what he saw, as someone who believed in the cause. Biographers, who investigated Flynn's private life, discovered documentation of disturbing connections to Nazi operatives. They found evidence of deeply held racist views toward Black people and Jewish people. His private writings revealed a man who viewed the world through a rigid racial hierarchy. Rooted in his upbringing in colonial Tasmania, Flynn saw non-white people as fundamentally inferior. It wasn't a phase. It wasn't a youthful mistake. It was the foundation of how he understood human beings and human worth. On set, colleagues documented his casual use of racial slurs, delivered without shame. He openly expressed contempt for working alongside minority performers. He carried these attitudes with the same effortless ease he carried a sword on screen, as if racism were simply part of being a gentleman of his era, as if hatred were just part of the social fabric. Errol Flynn represented old Hollywood royalty, the kind of star whose charm and good looks made their hatred completely invisible to audiences who loved them. They saw the adventure, they saw the romance, they saw the smile. They never saw the Nazi sympathies, they never heard the slurs, they never witnessed the contempt. Flynn's racism hid behind adventure and a movie star smile. But the next name on this list might be the most surprising so far, because he was called the King of Hollywood, and his racist affiliations have been buried for decades. Number 6. Clark Gable, the King's segregated court. When Paul Newman arrived in Hollywood in the early 1950s, one name still towered above everyone else in the entire industry. Clark Gable, the King of Hollywood. The man who played Rhett Butler, the actor whose on-screen presence defined what a leading man was supposed to be for an entire generation. His star power was unmatched. His influence over the industry was enormous. What history has largely buried is how Clark Gable used that influence. He was a founding member of the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Values. He stood alongside Walt Disney, John Wayne, and other powerful conservative figures in Hollywood. This wasn't casual involvement. His name wasn't just on a document. The Motion Picture Alliance actively worked to suppress progressive voices in the industry. They opposed integration efforts. They used their considerable influence to blacklist anyone who challenged the racial power structure that kept Hollywood overwhelmingly white. Gable aligned himself with the most reactionary forces in the entertainment world. While he played charming heroes on screen, characters audiences loved and rooted for, characters whose moral authority felt genuine, behind closed doors, he supported the very systems designed to keep Hollywood segregated. His opposition to progressive movements within the industry was well documented among his contemporaries, even if the public never heard about it. The industry knew, Hollywood insiders knew, but the American people had no idea. Newman came up in an industry that Gable's generation had carefully constructed, an industry designed from the ground up to exclude. The king's crown was built on a foundation of keeping others out. His legacy carries that weight, whether audiences want to acknowledge it or not. But Gable's influence operated largely behind the scenes. The next name on this list didn't hide behind backroom politics. He put his views on the record, in a national magazine, and he never apologized for a single word. Number 5. Robert Mitchum, the denier. Of everyone on this list, Robert Mitchum is the one who actually shared a screen with Paul Newman. They appeared together in the 1964 comedy, What a Way to Go, working side by side during a period when Newman was actively involved in the civil rights movement. Mitchum projected toughness and cool indifference on screen. His heavy-lidded eyes and deep voice made him one of the most iconic tough guys in cinema history. Off-screen, he harbored views that wouldn't fully surface for another 2 decades. In 1983, Robert Mitchum sat down for an interview with Esquire magazine. The conversation exposed attitudes he had apparently carried for years. When asked about the 6 million Jewish people who died in the Holocaust, Mitchum responded with words that denied one of history's greatest atrocities. He made anti-Semitic remarks throughout the interview. He expressed racist views that shocked even the interviewer conducting the conversation. When the public backlash hit, Mitchum offered what many consider one of Hollywood's weakest excuses. He claimed he had been in character from a recent film role during the entire interview. His written apology called the whole situation a tragedy of errors. He insisted the reporter had misunderstood him. Esquire never retracted a single word of the article. Earlier in his career, Mitchum had turned down a starring role in The Defiant Ones, a groundbreaking film about racial tension starring Sidney Poitier. His stated reason was that he didn't believe a black man and white man would ever be chained together in the segregated South. Some colleagues interpreted this as an unwillingness to share equal screen time with Poitier, one of the era's biggest black stars. While Paul Newman was marching on Washington and putting his career at risk for civil rights, Robert Mitchum was harboring views that would eventually make national headlines. Their shared screen time in 1964 is a reminder that in Golden Age Hollywood, a civil rights hero could be standing right next to someone who denied the Holocaust, and nobody in the audience would ever know. Number 4. Ward Bond, Hollywood's enforcer. What happens when the biggest bully in Hollywood becomes the gatekeeper of an entire industry? You get Ward Bond. Ward Bond was a character actor who appeared in dozens of films. Most people remember him for his work in westerns and his roles in John Ford pictures. That's the public record. That's what audiences knew. Inside the industry, Ward Bond was known for something far more destructive than any character he ever played. He was Hollywood's enforcer. Bond was a founding member of the Motion Picture Alliance, and he took that role personally. He became known as a vicious bully who used intimidation and threats to pressure actors, writers, and directors into naming names during the blacklist era. If you supported civil rights, if you believed in racial equality, if you showed any sympathy for integration, Ward Bond would label you a communist and work to destroy your career, and he had the connections to do it. His close friendship with John Wayne and director John Ford gave him access to Hollywood's most powerful circles. He used that access like a weapon. Colleagues documented his open use of racial slurs on set, delivered loudly and without shame. He refused to treat minority crew members with basic human dignity. He ran aggressive campaigns against anyone who dared challenge the racial hierarchy that kept Hollywood segregated. Bond didn't just hold racist views privately, like some names on this list. He weaponized them. He turned his position in Hollywood's power structure into a tool for enforcing white supremacy across the entire industry, one destroyed career at a time. He was the active agent of segregation. He was the muscle behind the system. Newman's progressive generation had to fight through men like Ward Bond just to exist in Hollywood. Bond was the wall, standing between the industry's racist past and its slowly integrating future. Bond was the enforcer who kept the machine running. But the next man on this list didn't need enforcers. He didn't operate through intimidation or blackmail. He said exactly what he believed to a national magazine and never apologized for a single word. This is the kind of untold Hollywood history that YouTube doesn't want trending. If you're watching this right now, you're part of a small percentage of people actually interested in the truth. Hit that like button and add this to your watch later, because the next two names are where this gets truly dark. Number 3. John Wayne, the cowboy who believed in white supremacy. In 1971, at the absolute peak of his fame, John Wayne sat down with Playboy magazine and said something that should have ended his career overnight. "I believe in white supremacy until the blacks are educated to a point of responsibility." Those weren't words taken out of context. They weren't misquoted or exaggerated. He said them deliberately to a national publication with millions of readers. He stated his belief in white supremacy as casually as someone might discuss the weather. In that same interview, he defended the taking of Native American land, saying indigenous people were selfish for trying to keep it for themselves. He dismissed diversity in Hollywood casting and made clear that he saw no reason to change the racial makeup of the industry he dominated. He wasn't hiding, he wasn't being subtle, he was stating his ideology plainly. What makes John Wayne's case so revealing isn't just what he said. It's what happened afterward. Nothing. His career continued without interruption. He remained one of the biggest box office draws in the world. The industry's complete silence in response to openly stated white supremacist beliefs told you everything about what Hollywood truly valued at that moment. Wayne actively campaigned against hiring black actors in leading roles. He used his enormous influence to enforce those preferences. When he directed The Alamo in 1960, he rejected Sidney Poitier, the era's biggest black star, for a role. He refused to work with black directors throughout his entire career. At the 1973 Academy Awards, when Marlon Brando sent Sachin Littlefeather to the stage to protest Hollywood's treatment of Native Americans, John Wayne was reportedly furious. Security had to physically restrain him from confronting her on stage. His rage at Native American advocacy revealed the depth of his convictions. Letters Wayne wrote throughout his life, now archived at USC, show his racial views remained consistent until his death in 1979. He never recanted a single statement. He never issued an apology. He never showed a moment of regret. Newman and Wayne existed in the same Hollywood, but represented opposite poles of what a movie star could be. Newman marched for civil rights. Wayne openly opposed them. Newman supported integration. Wayne enforced segregation. They were the two faces of Golden Age Hollywood, and the industry rewarded them both. Wayne said it out loud. The industry let him keep his crown. But there's one final name on this list, and what puts him at the very top isn't just what he believed, it's what he did when he heard the news that Martin Luther King Jr. had been shot. Number 1. Walter Brennan, the beloved grandfather who danced when King died. 3 Academy Awards. 3. Walter Brennan remains the only actor in history to win 3 Best Supporting Actor Oscars. 3 times. An unprecedented achievement. Think about what that means in terms of industry recognition, peer respect, and cultural influence. On screen, audiences knew him as the lovable, folksy grandfather figure. The kindly old-timer, with a warm smile and a gentle voice. His portrayal of Grandpa Amos McCoy on The Real McCoys made him one of the most beloved television personalities in America. Families invited him into their living rooms every single week. Parents felt comfortable with him around their children. Grandparents saw themselves in him. America trusted Walter Brennan. It wasn't real. Behind that carefully constructed image was a man whose hatred ran so deep it defined every aspect of his private life. Walter Brennan was a committed, active member of the John Birch Society, one of America's most notorious far-right organizations. He didn't just attend meetings, he was fully committed to the ideology. He endorsed segregationist George Wallace for president in 1968 because he believed Richard Nixon was too liberal. In 1972, he backed far-right candidate John Schmitz, a fellow Birch Society member. Brennan didn't just hold these views privately, he actively spread propaganda. He recorded tracks at a John Birch Society convention where he spoke in character as his beloved Grandpa Amos. Using that trusted voice, the voice America loved, the voice that represented warmth and safety, to tell attendees that the civil rights movement was a communist conspiracy, that African Americans were being manipulated by outside agitators with an anti-American agenda. He weaponized the character America loved to sell hatred to people who trusted him. His show's own producer, Sheldon Leonard, publicly called him the racist Walter Brennan and deliberately distanced himself from working with him. Writers who worked on his shows documented his constant use of racial slurs on set. He vocally expressed his belief in the mental superiority of white people. He once stated publicly that the 1965 Watts riots could have been stopped with a machine gun. He was so extreme in his views that he genuinely believed John Wayne was a communist. That's how far-right Walter Brennan stood. But there's one story that defines Walter Brennan's legacy more than any other. In April of 1968, news reached Hollywood that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. The nation mourned. People wept in the streets. The entertainment industry fell silent in grief. Millions of people around the world were processing the death of the man who had defined the civil rights movement. Walter Brennan danced. Multiple crew members from the set of The Guns of Will Sonnet reported that when the news broke, Brennan didn't just express satisfaction, he physically danced a jig. He cackled with delight. The man America knew as a lovable grandfather literally celebrated the murder of the civil rights movement's greatest leader. He reportedly had the same reaction months later when Robert F. Kennedy was killed. The contrast with Paul Newman could not be more absolute. Newman narrated civil rights documentaries and marched alongside Dr. King. He put his career and his safety on the line for equality. He risked everything. Brennan danced when King died. That single contrast tells you everything about the two Americas that existed inside Hollywood's golden age. That's the difference between a man who stood for something and a man who stood for hatred. These 9 men weren't simply products of a less enlightened time. They were powerful figures who made deliberate choices. Every single day, they chose to exclude. They chose to diminish. They chose to harm. They used their influence to enforce segregation. They destroyed careers. They built an industry where people of color were invisible unless they were servants or stereotypes. They created a system. They maintained it. They defended it. And they passed it on to the next generation. Paul Newman saw all of it from the inside. He was there. He worked alongside these men. He knew their private conversations. He understood their ideology. He witnessed the damage they caused. Instead of staying silent like so many of his peers, he chose to fight. He marched when marching was dangerous. He spoke up when silence was safer. He proved that you could be one of the biggest stars in Hollywood history without surrendering your principles. You could have wealth, fame, power, and Oscar recognition and still choose to stand against injustice. These 9 men proved that many of his peers chose a very different path. If you found this journey through Hollywood's hidden history valuable, if this is the kind of untold story you actually want to watch, subscribe to this channel right now. Because we're committed to bringing you the truth about entertainment history, the complicated pasts of icons, and the stories that YouTube's algorithm would rather suppress. Share this video. Send it to someone who cares about actual history. Add it to your watch later. Because the more people see this, the harder it becomes for these stories to stay buried. Drop a comment below and tell us which of these 9 shocked you the most. What part of this history did you never know? And if you want more deep dives into Golden Age Hollywood, vintage entertainment icons, and the real stories behind the legends, hit that notification bell so you never miss when we upload. We've got more untold histories coming that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the entertainment industry. Thanks for watching. Thanks for caring about the truth.